Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Well, now for our No-Go Britain disability debate, over to Jackie Long at the Olympic Park in East London. Jackie.
Good evening from the Aquatic Centre in London's Queen Elizabeth Olympic Park for our No-Go Britain disability debate. This impressive centre, designed by the late architect Zaha Hadid, includes many features specifically to help those with disabilities. That's a legacy of the 2012 Paralympics. But as we've been revealing this year on Channel 4 News, many barriers remain for disabled people in their everyday lives. Tonight, we have brought many of those who have featured in our films face to face with a government minister to talk about almost every aspect of their lives, how they're viewed by others, how difficult it is to find work, to travel around, go out, and often just to get by. Today, athletes from Britain's Paralympics team arrived back at London's Heathrow Airport with the record haul of 147 medals they won at Rio. 64 of them were gold. That surpasses the extraordinary achievements we saw here at this Olympic Park 4 years ago. But what is it like if you're not superhuman? In a survey we did this year, 1 in 3 young disabled people said they'd experienced discrimination since the last Paralympics. 1 in 4 said they'd been patronised. And a study last month found that disabled people are more likely to worry about being victims of crime than those who aren't. We've also reported on how hard it is to find accessible public toilets, to travel on public transport and to go out.
Take a look, what do you see?
They've wowed us with their superhuman feats, the Paralympians, covered in gold for their efforts. But what's life like if you're disabled and not a medal-winning athlete?
Look, I've got 3!
For the past year, we've been looking at the barriers many face when living an ordinary life takes a superhuman effort.
Where is it?
From the most basic of needs.
And I just want you to notice there's a hook, so I don't have to put my handbag on the floor. But it's absolutely fine to put my daughter on the floor to change her.
To the daily abuse that becomes part of normal life for some.
Shouted things like, you know, oh, that woman makes me want to vomit.
People with assistance dogs being told they can't come in.
Maybe they think I put a harness on my pet dog just so that I could take him to restaurants.
And a transport system that's just no go.
You can only get on if you dismantle it and carry it on yourself. I said if I could do that, I wouldn't need the scooter in the first place.
Tonight, we debate how to make Britain truly accessible to all. Well, we're going to be talking about all those issues now with many of the people who've taken part in our No-Go Britain series this year. And our panel, Margaret Hickish is from Network Rail, who operate all the stations and platforms in our rail service. The Education and Skills Minister, Robert Halfon, and David Pearson from the Association of Directors of Adult Social Services. We're also joined by a great panoply of guests as well. One of the big legacies of the Paralympics in London was this sort of golden dawn, this idea that perceptions of what disabled people could achieve and how they would live would change. Has that changed, Jackie?
I think it has changed slightly, but not enough in the amount of time that we've had till now. There are still many things such as care that still needs to be looked at, and how people can stay up late, and public transport. There are just so many issues that still need to be readdressed.
In terms of day-to-day life, Victoria, we saw you in one of our films. Day-to-day life at times seemed pretty tough.
Yeah, it can be. It's certainly not easy for me. And in my job, I co-run a network of young disabled campaigners called Trailblazers, so I hear every day stories of all the barriers they face trying to live their lives. And I think that the Paralympics is wonderful, but we shouldn't assume that because the public have embraced the Paralympics, then it means disableism, disability prejudice doesn't exist anymore, because unfortunately it still does.
Other people on perceptions, whether they've changed?
Look, 40% of disabled people still feel like they need to hide their disability. That's new research done by Scope. That is because we don't feel equal. In every walk of life, within our job, within our social life, we still feel that we're not treated like everybody else. So we feel that we can't be our authentic self.
I mean, Paige, what about you? I mean, you told a pretty grim story in the film that you made, which was about a violent attack.
In November 2014, I was attacked in a nightclub. I was physically assaulted in a nightclub, unprovoked, just because I was there. And to me, that still shows a massive inequality, because that wouldn't have happened to me if I wasn't disabled. The language he was using was implying it was because of my disability and the fact that he just didn't like it.
How much do you think that is a problem for the rest of society?
I think with my course that I do, I'm very interested in journalism, and I researched that, and I found a lot of other young disabled people had had similar experiences to mine. So I think it's more prevalent than people actually assume it to be.
I mean, in the last year, we've been looking not just at perceptions, but at practical things that it's sort of extraordinary that we're still talking about. Access to toilets. Jo, tell us about your experience looking after your daughter.
Yeah, it's something I feel so passionately about, that everywhere that is something that's social for people to do and enjoy should have a changing places toilet. I find it outrageous in this day and age that my daughter has to be laid on a public toilet floor, and I have to...
A pretty filthy one in the film we saw.
I have to lift her onto the floor to do that and lift her back up into her chair. A changing places toilet offers a hoist and a safe place to actually lay her, so that as a parent carer we don't get injured for the future for looking after her continuously, but also she has the dignity of being able to change in private and it to be something that's allowed for everybody. I mean, I'd like to say to the ministers today, you know, how would they feel about standing barefoot in a public toilet? Because that's basically what we have to do daily.
Robert Halfon, the Minister.
Well, first of all, I agree with you. I was born with spastic diplegia myself. I have walking issues. Only on the weekend, I was at a restaurant, which was at a modern restaurant with my wife. And when you said, where is the toilet? They said down some stairs, which were very narrow, and then you had literally a half-mile walk to the toilet from the stairs. I then did that, and so on, and then at the end of the meal, I wanted to go to the toilet again, but I thought I can't face doing the stairs, so they said actually there's a public toilet a disabled public toilet round the block. So thinking how wonderful, I went there. Of course it was locked, and of course you need the key, and of course I didn't have the key. So I'm well aware of these things.
But what is your government doing about it? Why are we still talking about this now, going to the toilet, the most basic of needs?
Well, there are practical things that we need to do, not just on toilets, but on parking, on a whole range of things. The government are looking at these things. The last disabled minister started a review into restaurants. Even when they have a disabled toilet, they often have the chairs stuck in the disabled toilet. And yes, we need to do a lot. There aren't easy answers always. Sometimes they're old buildings.
What about legislation?
I suspect that once the disability minister's finished her review into these kind of things, that something substantial will come out. Because, in my belief, we can help people with disabilities, whether it's your daughter, my own situation, whoever it may be.
Not helping people with disabilities. You're making 12 billion austerity cuts. People are dying in their thousands. How dare you? How dare you come on here and say that you're in the same position as other mums and kids, carers facing billions of cuts, the benefit cap, the £30 ESA cut. How dare you?
Robert Halfon, I mean, respond to that. You voted for that ESA cut.
So I wouldn't deny for 1 minute there haven't been painful decisions.
Sorry, you did vote for that ESA
yes,
cut that the lady is talking
I'm not
about.
denying for 1 minute there haven't been painful decisions, but overall, the country, and I'm proud of this, is spending 50 billion a year just on disability benefits. That's the second that's the second highest in the world. That is more than we spend on schools, billions more than we spend on schools, billions more than we spend on other areas. And I'm proud of that 50 billion. It's going up. So yes, there have been difficulties in some areas, but we are still spending 50 billion a year. And 50 billion a year, I don't even know what 5 billion is, let alone 50 billion.
But there are people shaking their heads here who clearly don't feel the benefit of that spending, but who they clapped for the lady making the point about benefit cuts and cuts to public spending. So why is their experience very different from the one you're suggesting?
Well, as I say, there have been difficult decisions in terms of some benefits. And where there is injustice, we need to look at it, and we do.
Difficult decisions. Your policies are ideological policy designed to remove benefits from disabled people, designed to kill disabled people, designed to make disabled people homeless, designed to make disabled people go hungry, designed to exclude us from society. Don't deny it. You're killing disabled people. People in mental distress are taking their own lives. And I tell you something, it's about time that your government face justice for the deaths of disabled people. Your government has blood on its hands for the deaths of disabled people.
We will come back to the benefits issue, which I know is clearly one that touches an awful lot of people. But on the issue of accessibility, making life equal for people, Daniel, the issue of toilets is pretty basic. You've campaigned for hoists in hotels and public places. What do you want the government to do on that?
Yeah, I want the government to make those changes so that when hotels are rebuilding new hotels, I want the government to make it lower, because it's pretty difficult for me and my partner to basically plan any time together away, and even when we do, there's an extra expense involved. It's everything about expense with disability, and I don't see why it should be.
David Pearson, I mean, the LGA, you, under building regulations, presumably could make companies put in these hoists, make these toilets genuinely accessible for people.
What's absolutely clear is that to meet the requirements and the aspirations of disabled people, it needs a cross-government approach, and at local level, cross-organisations to work together to make sure that changing places toilets happen, that people have the access that they require, that care services are available to give people the individual choice of control. And the organisation I represent, ADAS, we've been working for the last 20 years with disabled people who've cried out for personal budgets, choice and control.
The problem is you're talking 20 years and we're still talking about the same problems.
Yes, and progress has been made. You cited this on some of your films. But clearly we are in the 6th year of austerity as far as social care budgets are concerned. Needs are rising in the way that we know across this country, and there is an issue about adequately funded social care services.
But whose
to make
fault
sure
is that? Because who should they come to? Should they look at you, or should they look at the government?
There is clearly an issue about priorities for the government in terms of public expenditure.
Is it your view that perhaps disabled people should take more of a priority than they're currently doing?
We spend 2%, only 2% of our income as a nation on social care, and it's falling. We have to make sure that the aspirations of the people in this room are met through making sure that there are adequately funded public services.
Well, one of the other big issues is always transport. Gina, tell us a little bit about whether you think the rail system is getting any more accessible for people with disabilities.
No, it's not. It's sort of come to a standstill. Nothing is improving. I had one journey where there was absolutely no problem on the outward journey. Just easy. On the return journey, totally different. The driver would not let me on the train. He told me, as I've said before, you must fold it up and carry it on. And I said, I can't do that. If I could, I would not need it. It's no bigger than a wheelchair. There is absolutely no reason for them not to
allow us on. So you can get one way, but not the other way.
And this has happened to many, many disabled people, not just me. It's 2016. When's it going to improve?
Well, from Network Rail.
So one of the things we've been doing is educating people to understand just that it's not about making judgments. Since I joined Network Rail, we've changed the language we use, around being inclusive so people don't make judgments, because that's the big thing, is about them not making judgments.
But unfortunately it does come down to money, doesn't it? And didn't Network Rail cut 50 million off their access budget just this year?
Well, actually that was done on the basis of the report by Sir Peter Hendy, and although the Access for All budget meant that we are not working as fast on the stations as we were before, they will still be made accessible.
How long will Gina have to wait, do you think?
Well, absolutely. I mean, I do recognise that, and what I can tell you, that the Access for All is not the only way we are making things more accessible.
Gina?
Next time I travel to visit family, am I going to be allowed on this train to get me there?
So what I can tell you is that the Association of Train Operators are looking at end-to-end journeys for disabled people. They are looking at what the experiences are like and how that can be improved, really seriously thinking about what the personal experience...
How personally disappointed do you feel at how slow this seems to be happening?
Oh, inevitably. As someone who uses the rail network all the time, I have to for work, I know those sorts of experiences. I've had them too. The great thing about me having that sort of experience is that I can then go back and tell people this is not acceptable. So actually being inside Network Rail gives me far more voice to be able to get to perhaps more powerful people,
but do you
more directly.
Do you recognise that money and prioritisation is one of the problems?
Absolutely. And what we've done is turned it into business as usual.
So can we
Gina,
contact
really
you through Transport for All and get together and talk about this?
Absolutely, but Transport for All, I often speak to Transport for All, so please do.
Okay, for the moment that is it, but after the break, more from our No Go Britain debate here at the London Aquatic Centre. Why is it so hard for many disabled people to find work, and why are many not getting the care they need and struggling to get by?
We're tackling the hot topic of sugar. How much do we really know about it? And how does it affect our bodies and our brains?
Is there any difference between white sugar and brown sugar?
Is it better for me, do you think?
Is it?
Dispatches investigate the battle for the Labour Party.
Well, I want to politically support Jeremy Corbyn because I agree with what he represents.
What's going on?
There's been an allegation made against you.
They think I'm Jimmy Savile.
But what if he did it, Mum? No. I choose to believe him.
I didn't do this. This week on 4.
Welcome back to the Aquatic Centre in London's Queen Elizabeth Olympic Park for our No Go Britain disability debate. Along with an audience made up of people we have featured in our reports this year, I'm also joined by Margaret Hickish from Network Rail, the Education and Skills Minister Robert Halfon, and David Pearson from the Local Government Association. Well, we're going to carry on our debate talking about some of the many issues. One I know is absolutely critical to a lot of people here, and it is social care budgets. Jackie, what's happened to yours?
So I've had a care budget since I was a teenager, and I didn't need to use it as much just because the condition I have is progressive, so the older I get, the weaker I'm going to get. So my question is, why are care agencies and companies allowed to suggest at 7 o'clock bedtime when I'm a young person who wants to live spontaneously? Why do they have to tell me or dictate to me when I can and can't go to sleep?
I mean, David Pearson, it's pretty disgraceful, isn't it? A grown woman having to go to bed at the same time as a 7-year-old because of her disability.
What we absolutely want to do is to make sure that people can choose when they go to bed, how they live their lives, help to go to work and meet your aspirations in terms of the way you want to live your life. And that is where best practice is in this country in terms of making sure that you have the care that you need through possibly things like a direct payment or a personal budget that we've been working on and is enshrined in the Care Act, which came in last year. The issue is, though, that if the cuts to local authority budgets has meant a 4.6 billion, 31% reduction in its funding to last year. And to stand still this year, we would have needed another 1.1 billion.
Robert Halford, that's you then, isn't it?
So
that's
we
your
do,
government.
we do need to, we absolutely do make sure there's caring, compassionate people who can help you to live the life you want to live a good life. But we need to balance that with appropriate levels of funding.
Robert Halford, what do you want to say to the Minister?
But how can me as a grown-up, as somebody who wants to be an active member of society, be constantly told by not one but multiple agencies that they can't come after a certain time, or I have to get up at a certain time? Like, if I'm only supposed to sleep 8 hours a day, that means I should have 16 hours to do whatever I want to do. If it gets cut to 8 hours a day, if I gave you 8 hours and said you only have 8 hours a day to get up, shower and do whatever you want to do, I'm sure you wouldn't get much done.
Robert Halford.
Well, clearly that is wrong. But the whole idea of the personal care budget was to put you in charge. Without quoting statistics again, the government are putting many billions of pounds into try and improve social care. They, as has been said, they also introduced the precept to allow councils to raise more funds in order to fund social care.
But as David Pearson said, there's a big shortfall, isn't there, in how much you need?
There is a big shortfall, yeah.
So that's the problem, isn't it?
Of course, there will always be a need for more, but many hundreds of billions are going into this area. And, of course, there will always, as I say, there will be money that could be increased, but you have to balance a budget on care, you have to balance the budget in terms of funding the NHS, you have to balance the budget in terms of paying for many other things as well.
Sorry, what was your point?
Closed the Independent Living Fund, which was set up to avoid the situations that Jackie was in. I'm a lady of a certain age now, right? And I was receiving ILF support from when I was 21 until, 2010? And that enabled me to do all the things that Jackie wants to do, that everybody in this room wants to do. And then they took the decision to close the fund because they said it's all going to be lovely under the local authorities. Well, it is not lovely. As Claire said, people are in really, we had the launch of Inclusion London's report on the closure of the fund, and we were in a room hearing about people, I'm not being funny, but people who are made to wear incontinence pads even though they're not incontinent. There's no life. They're sitting there.
There are many, many people who will tell you the closure of the Independent Living Fund, the clue was in the title, it enabled them to live independently, which is what people with disabilities want. And they feel they can no longer do that because of the closure of that fund. How can you justify it?
The money was given to local councils, substantial sum of money to local councils, because they are closer to, but that is the fault of the local council for not spending the money in that way. But the whole idea was to bring the decisions closer to everybody.
Yes, David Pearson, it's your fault.
So I think that there are some fantastic examples up and down the country of people living transformed lives by having had the Independent Living Fund and personal budgets and direct payments that are the forerunner of it. There are some marvellous examples, and it's a great tragedy that that isn't as widespread as we would all want. So we need to work together as government, as local authorities, as social care, to make sure that we have all those places right across the country.
Sorry, can I just take a question from the lady at the back?
I just want to make a point about the fact that this government wants to get disabled people back to work. They want to bridge the inequality gap between disabled people and able-bodied people in terms of employment. I found employment. I've got to change trains and I've got to go up 2 flights of stairs and down 2 flights of stairs within 4 minutes. For someone with my mobility problems, that's not exactly the easiest task. So there's going to be a select committee paper about disability and the built environment, and I'm going to be hopefully contributing to the evidence paper because I think that society disables us. I think there is such a thing as a social model of disability. Society disables me. You want me to work. Make my environment more accessible.
Work is key. Work is one of the issues that is also talked about. Zoe, you want to work. Tell me why you're not working.
I've applied for 200 jobs and I've attended over 150 interviews, and I'm getting really fed up. I'm volunteering at a nursery. I've got the right qualifications. I've got a level 4, 2 level 4s in early years. What are you going to do to support schools to
to get disabled people into employment.
I mean, Zoe is doing everything right. She's doing everything that your government wants her to do, but she's not being rewarded in the way she wants to be.
Well, first of all, you should be, but let me just say, to set the record before I just go on to what needs to be done. Over the last 5 years, 400 disabled people a day have got jobs. 3.4 million disabled people are now in work. But of course, more needs to be done. So in my own area, I'm in charge of apprenticeships. We are working very hard to try and get disabled people to do apprenticeships by incentivising employers. So just hold on. If
because FE students don't get DSA,
hold on.
I'm having to crowdfund my transport to college because disabled FE students.
Sorry, one at a time, if you would.
Look,
We'll
I'll
try
come
to
on
come
to
to
that
as
in a
many of you as
moment.
possible.
I will hold on. Just let me.
Disabilities who are I work in FE, so I know the figures here, and you have created a perfect storm that pushes disabled, young people in particular, and adults out of further education. It's often the only place that we have a chance to get an education where schools there is bullying or special schooling. It's the first time for a lot of people they can learn, they can feel free, and that they can feel good about themselves. What have you done? 16% of people in further education are people with an impairment or a specific learning disability, 8% in apprenticeships. You are systematically forcing us into nowhere, because the apprenticeships will not be available because of the prejudice, the access, the cuts you've made in funding for those things.
Thank you. Let me just say two things, just to finish first of all. So on the apprenticeships, we're saying to employers that if they have an apprentice who is disabled, they have to pay no costs in terms of training. The idea is to incentivise employers to make sure that, and we're also going to fund special adaptations if they're needed in terms of employers, and give existing support to the apprenticeship.
Zoe's clearly done the training she wants to do. Zoe has clearly done the training.
Yeah. So yeah.
That's a massive
and in terms of further education, there are two funds. There is, first of all, the bursary that is designed to help vulnerable people, which is many millions of pounds. There is an overall fund that goes to FE colleges in order to help disabled people, which is over £500 million. So there's an enormous amount of money going to try and make sure that disadvantaged students and people with disabilities get into further education, because many people do. And
Zoe, just 1 second, if you would. Zoe, what's your response to Mr. Halfon? Do you feel comforted by what he's saying?
I've done research in my local authority of nurseries that have employed disabled people, and there's only one nursery that has employed a disabled person. The rest say they don't apply for jobs at a nursery. That isn't true, because I've applied for loads of jobs in nurseries, and
Victoria,
I think it's a real issue.
Very quickly.
There are things happening in job centres with special disability advisors and so on. But let me just say this. Let me just make one important point.
People with disabilities is your government and its attitude.
Okay. Let me just say one important point. Even if
not logically what you are talking about.
Okay.
Again.
Let me just make one important point, even if the government did everything that everyone in this audience wanted, not necessarily, that you have to actually change, as has the whole point of this debate and the programmes you've been doing, you actually have to change the culture and language so that people are more encouraged
I want to return. Excuse me, I want to return. Sorry, Mr. Halfon. I want to return to all of these issues if we can, but I want to touch again on benefits, because it's been one of the biggest issues since the coalition government came in, led by the Conservatives, in terms of massive welfare reform affecting many disabled people. What's been your experience? You're one of the people who has been transferred from disability living allowance to the new personal independence payment. Was it a smooth transition for you?
Not at all, not at all. I was awarded DLA in 1979. My parents fought really hard for it, went through the process. They had used the car until I was old enough to drive, and I had a car myself. My disability hasn't changed. I've got cerebral palsy. I was born 1 pound 2 ounces, no fault of my own. I'm a really educated person. I want to get off my backside and get a decent job. I'm a qualified teacher. I can't get one. I have to do supply work. Without my vehicle, I would have lost that supply work job.
But how would you describe the process for you?
The process, obviously I had, it went through in December to say that they were going to assess me. And they actually, in the end, came to my home and interviewed me in my home. I felt very degraded. I felt that I had to justify every single pound that I was given and awarded. I had to justify why I could keep my car. I had to prove that I could do certain things or not do certain things to keep that vehicle, and I lost it.
Isn't it right that if you are receiving benefits, you should be tested on that? What do you think? Johnny?
I mean, from my perspective, I'm blind and I use a guide dog, and under the government's new laws, I'm going to be reassessed in case my disability has changed. My disability might have changed. I went to the doctors quite recently. I'm getting blinder, but I'm still going to have to go through this process regardless. And there is something very, very degrading and fundamentally quite insulting when someone says, well, are you really disabled enough? It's like someone metaphorically poking you in the chest.
Robert Halfon, on those points, people feel pretty upset, humiliated by this process. It looks as though the targets for saving money will not be made. Hasn't this all been wrong, a waste of time, and actually a lot of people have been hurt in the process?
Well, this isn't about saving money. If you look at the PIP, it's actually been extended to help people with mental health, which it never did before. And the idea of the testing is to make sure, the idea of testing...
Why don't we just access medical records?
Yes.
It has it all there.
So, the idea of testing is to make sure that money is going to those who need it most. Of course, yes. Of course, there may be things that go wrong with the testing and there are injustices that occur. The idea of having it at home was so that, because previous experience of people having to travel or having awful experiences of going to places where they had to walk upstairs, no parking and so on and so forth. That is why that people are being tested, because we're trying to make sure that the money goes to those who most need it.
Very briefly, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but given what people feel about the testing, and that's well known, do you regret any of it? Do you regret voting in these changes because you did vote for them?
I believe in the reforms, but I want the testing to be humane. And the government are looking at testing all the time, and they've already made huge... What's one of the reasons, as I say, why some of the testing is happening at home now, which didn't necessarily very rarely happen before in terms of some of the other benefits.
Very briefly, I'm going to have to say the debate now continues on the Channel 4 News Facebook page. But from me here at the Aquatic Centre in London, and John back in the studio, goodbye.
I've been